begin the recording now. So welcome everyone who's watching us on the recording again. You're joining the Sharing Economy and Wellbeing webinar, and we're just about to get started and introduce our first speaker this evening, who I think is going to be Tom Llewellyn, who's joining us from Shareable. We're really excited to hear his insights on the sharing economy and well-being. Tom is a podcast host, a filmmaker, and he's actually the partnerships director at Shareable. He's joining us early in the morning for him from the States, and he's going to share a presentation with us. So I'll hand over to you now, Tom.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for joining us tonight. For those of you that it's tonight. Joining you from the hills behind San Francisco in California. And like was said, my name is Tom Llewellyn. I work with Shareable.net, and Shareable has been around for just over a decade, promoting people-powered solutions for the common good. And we do that through our publishing, which is what many people know us for. And we've published just over 4,000 articles in the last 10 years, covering all the different ways that people are sharing. We have over 300 how-to guides on our website for communities to kind of engage and work together to build out new kind of physical and digital sharing-based infrastructure, as well as what was mentioned, podcasts and videos and everything like that as well. Another core component of our work is to, in addition to the publishing and then working with community organizers to start new projects, we also do policy advising and have worked with various municipalities around the globe. And in the last couple of years, we started to really focus in on the way that the different projects that we've been profiling and the policies that we were promoting were being affected, or were going to become more and more affected by the changing climate. And it got us to really think about, how communities kind of can come together during disasters, kind of what that looks like, and how we can, build collective resilience before disasters strike. And so 3 years ago, we launched our podcast, The Response, which looks into this. And it's kind of a mix of conversations with people that are community leaders or city officials, and then also documentaries about a specific disaster and a specific group that kind of rose up to meet the challenge of that disaster in a way that we feel like could be replicated by other communities. And from the podcast, we have released a book, which you can download for free on our website, The Response, Building Collective Resilience in the Wake of Disasters, as well as a film. And our documentary film is also available for communities to host free screenings, either in person or right now virtual. And the film looks specifically at Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria and the ways that communities came together during that moment to build solidarity, mutual aid, and support permanent community-based infrastructure to not only support folks that were in the immediate aftermath of the storm, but to kind of build community and cohesion moving forward. And those mutual aid centers across Puerto Rico have continued to be utilized, and even now during the pandemic. So in the last few months, one of the things that has been incredibly heartening to myself and so many others that have been doing this work for a long time is just how much community sharing has been taking place. People coming together with their neighbors, on both the small and the large scale, buying groceries for each other, supporting the unhoused, or rough sleepers, as you would say in the UK. And just sharing the resources that they have. We have seen this giant swell of mutual aid, where before kind of the concept of mutual aid was a little bit more niche, around the edges, has now really become mainstream. You see stories, in Teen Vogue and, on CNN and all these different ideas that word mutual aid is really coming up. And we recently did an audio documentary about one such initiative in the United States, in Chico, California, where a group that aligns themselves with the Democratic Socialists of America have been, again, buying groceries and supporting people in public housing, going out to communities that are unhoused, and while also working on kind of more permanent housing and support solutions. So I recommend, if people are interested in more on this kind of subject, to find our podcast, which you can find at theresponspodcast.org or on our website at Shareable. And we're going to go into a little bit more depth, but I just figure in the Q&A as we have this discussion, and I'm looking forward to that dialogue. But I think I'll just kind of cut it off there for now as my personal introduction. Again, and if anybody wants to follow up with me directly after this webinar, feel free. My email is tom@shareable.net, and you can follow me on Twitter as well. So, thank you.
Thanks so much, Tom, for giving that insight into some of your amazing work. So we're going to hear brief presentations from both of our speakers this evening, because we really wanted to give a lot of time for us to get into discussion and Q&A and breakout rooms, and make this kind of an interactive experience for you all. So just to say, if you've got questions directly following Tom's presentation, feel free to put them in the chat box now. My colleague Roger is going to be kind of keeping track of the chat box questions asked throughout the webinar and giving a summary of them at the end. So we'll have a space for all of your questions to be put to Tom and Benita towards the end of the webinar. So now, thank you again, Tom. And yeah, really interesting what you say about the amount of community response that's been seen in this time, and look forward to kind of delving into more discussion about that. But for now, we're going to hand over to our next speaker, which is Benita Matofska. I did check how to pronounce your surname, and I'm sorry that I'm going to completely fluff it. Benita Matofska.
You got it.
Thank you. So Benita is a change maker, a speaker, and an author of a really amazing book called Generation Share, which she's going to tell us a bit about this evening, I'm sure. And she's also the founder of a really amazing project called The People Who Share. So really excited to have her with us this evening, together with Tom, sharing this discussion. I'm going to just briefly check in with you if you're okay to share directly your slides, Benita, or whether you'd like someone else.
I'm hoping so. So we're going to give it a go. We'll give it a go.
Okay, I'll hand over to you.
It's deciding whether it wants to behave. Let's have a look. Okay. Okay, are you able to see my slides?
Not yet, but it might just take a little minute to load.
I think it's not behaving for some reason. It's saying that I'm screen sharing, but you can't see them. So I can see them, but you can't see them. So I think probably if Mirella has them at her end, I think that's going to be the best way to go.
Great. Mirella, do you have them to share? Great. Okay, if you stop sharing, Benita and Mirella will start. That would be
I don't know why. It's very strange.
No worries. I'm sorry about that last minute change. Sorry, everyone, but
That's
hopefully,
all right.
no technology.
You gotta love it.
Exactly. There we go. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Mi. If you just put it as a slideshow from the start, and then Benita can let you know when to flip onto the next one.
That's fine. Not too many slides, fortunately. Well, first of all, while we're sorting out the slides, thank you so much for inviting me to come and share some thoughts and ideas and perspectives on this really interesting topic. So I'm Benita Matofska. I've already been introduced as the founder of The People Who Share, and we are a charity. We focus on how we can help the planet and people in need through the sharing of vital resources. And we're probably best known for an initiative that we started some years ago that's now grown into Global Sharing Week. And Global Sharing Week starts next week. It's from the 1st to the 7th of June. And ordinarily, Global Sharing Week brings together people in their communities to share in the form of physical events. And last year we had over 540 events in over 40 countries, and we reached over 100 million people around the globe. And it's quite an extraordinary experience. Obviously, this year things are quite different. And so this year we're really focusing on how we can share in lots of ways, not so much through physical events, but we've produced what we're calling a global map of impact. So on our global map at globalsharingweek.org, you can find all kinds of projects that are creating all sorts of impact. So from food banks through to initiatives that are helping rough sleepers, through to community sharing initiatives where people are able to find ways that they can access the resources they need during this crisis. And any organisations that have any projects that they would like to register on the map, registration is now open, and we hope certainly by next week that we're going to see lots and lots of projects. The idea is to create a permanent resource where people can access all kinds of interesting initiatives that are happening. And we've been, as the people who share, we've been running a project called COVID-19 Food Relief. We've created a one-stop resource where people can access all kinds of initiatives. We have been focusing on the UK specifically for this, and it's a one-stop resource where people can access food banks and vital food resources, or indeed they can access volunteer opportunities or donate to organisations. So lots of different ways that people can get involved. Flo mentioned my book, Generation Share, which is something that I've been working on over the last 3 years. It was published last year for Global Sharing Week. And Generation Share is it's a collection of inspiring stories of change makers from around the world that are building a more caring, sharing society. And I just want to start with my definition for the sharing economy. You can go on to the next slide. So I define the sharing economy as a system to live by, and it's where we care for people and planet, and we share available resources in any way that we can. And I always find it's important to define the sharing economy because I believe there are lots of myths around what this might be. But this is really very much about a system to live by, where we care for people and planet and share available resources in any way that we can. And I've been driven to participate in this work because I have a belief that although our planetary resources are finite, our potential to share is unlimited. And if we can unleash that, there's really no end to what we can achieve. So I'll have the next slide. And I just want to share with you a lovely quote by Desmond Tutu, who says that a time of crisis is not just a time of anxiety and worry. It gives a chance, an opportunity to choose well or to choose badly. And what we've seen during this time is very much different responses to this crisis. And we have these opportunities. We have an opportunity to choose how we respond. And you can go on to the next slide. So I've noticed 3 types of sharing during the coronavirus crisis. And I just want to share some thoughts around that, perhaps for the discussion that we're going to have later on. So first of all, there's the shared action. Tom mentioned earlier this incredible outpouring of volunteering and social action. There's been so much kindness, what I call a kindness pandemic. We've had the largest volunteer effort since the Second World War. Here in the UK, within 48 hours, we had 750,000 people volunteered to help the NHS, to help the National Health Service, right at the beginning of this pandemic. And we've seen acts of kindness and shared action happening right across the globe. It's been absolutely extraordinary. And then we've got this shared understanding. So I believe what we've seen during this pandemic is a value shift. People have been led while they've been locked up, while they've been in their homes, while they've been asked to stay at home. People have been reevaluating their lifestyle, perhaps because many choices have been taken away from us. And I've spoken to many people who have this overwhelming feeling of gratitude for the things that we have. I started a blog some weeks ago called Love in the Time of Corona, where I collected these acts of kindness, but also people's ideas and thoughts about what was happening to them and what this period of having to slow down and have these fewer choices and really think about what's important in life. We've had this term key workers. We've been talking about how we place value on those that are the most important in our society in terms of the frontline work that they're doing to save lives, and also people in communities who are carrying out these extraordinary efforts. And there is a value shift that's been happening, and I think that's really interesting, this shared understanding, the fact that we've been leading lives of hyperconsumption, but actually in the face of shops being closed, people have taken that time to really look at what's important to them. Do they need to go out and buy the latest, greatest, next best thing? And it's, I think what's going to be interesting is really what happens next, which I know we're going to come on to talk about. And then the third type of sharing that I've seen is this shared responsibility. social distancing has been absolutely imperative. People having to really consider others and consider that their actions can have an impact on the state of the world and the state of people's lives and livelihoods. We are in this together, and we're hearing this a lot, this idea of, you know, the blitz spirit, the wartime spirit, and this notion of shared responsibility, how our actions can really protect others. So next slide, please. And I really, my view is that to change the world, we need to change the narrative. And my work really has been all about that. Next slide, please. And I mentioned this book, Generation Share, collection of inspiring stories of change makers, and really this is about changing the narrative. A number of these change makers that feature in the book have been doing extraordinary work during COVID-19, and I'm just at this stage going to mention two of them. There are so many I could mention. So if you go to the next slide, you have a snapshot of we have Arti Naik in the slums in Mumbai. She set up the Saki School for Girls Education from her one-room slum home. And what Arti's been doing during this time is she set up a digital school, enabling girls to continue their education safely at home and finding ways to deliver food and grain to those girls in her slums with her volunteer team safely, and providing all kinds of hygiene products and items so that people can be safe during the crisis. Really extraordinary work. And I think we're going to be sharing some links follow this event where people can actually donate to Arti. I should also say that Arti Naik, through the Generation Share project, every single copy of the book sold goes to educate, helps to educate a girl in the slums in Mumbai. So by purchasing a copy of the book, you're also enabling Arti to continue her work with girls in the slums. And then finally, I'd just like to mention Sarah Griffith on the next slide. Sarah is an extraordinary woman. She has a no-nonsense charity called Bridge 2. They go into situations of crisis in refugee camps. She talks about no bureaucracy and no faffing. When she arrived on the Vathi refugee camp, this was due to house 650 people. There are over 7,300 people. There was not a single, in early March, there was no hygiene equipment at all. And Sarah has worked tirelessly with her small volunteer team, and that they've been providing food and hygiene equipment, PPE, protective equipment for people to survive during this crisis, doing absolutely extraordinary work. And I hope people will help to support Bridge 2. But I guess my perspective on all of this is we have huge potential, and how we act in the coming months and the coming years following this crisis really is going to determine how well the world survives ultimately, and how we build this caring, sharing economy that I'm sure many of us feel really passionately about. So thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you so much, Benita, and thank you so much, Morella, for getting the slides there in the end. Yeah, wonderful, really inspiring to hear about your work and about your perspective on the current context and how sharing relates to it. So what we're going to move towards now, like I say, I really invite you guys to comment, share your questions in the chat box below, and we will definitely come to those. But it would be wonderful to just have a chat with both Tom and Benita around some key questions that have come up. First of all, about this relationship between the concept of well-being and the sharing economy. And at the Network Wellbeing, we really see well-being as something that's personal, but also that is collective. And there's also the potential for through the sharing economy for a kind of collective, more systemic shift. So I wonder if you could just speak about what you see as the power of sharing to create well-being, both at that personal level and also at the collective level. And yeah, happy for either of you to come in on that first, whoever would like to.
Well, I'm happy to respond. So I think for me, to share is to be human. Sharing is what makes us human. And so this whole concept of well-being and sharing are absolutely inextricably linked. When we as human beings fulfill our potential, we act in a way that is healthy, that enables others to be healthy. We care for the planet, the space in which we occupy. We care for others. And, you know, this enables us to build this more caring, sharing, sustainable society. So for me, the whole notion of well-being and sharing is about us fulfilling our human potential to share and collaborate, which is infinite. There are infinite possibilities when we're able to do that. And, you know, I talk about this idea of finite planetary resources, but this infinite capability to share and collaborate. And that's when I see as being our happiest. And, you know, that's a way it's contagious also. I think that whole idea of contagion, of happiness and positivity and well-being is all absolutely interlinked for me.
Wonderful, yeah, and that's such a beautiful way to put it. The kind of that we do live on a finite planet. We need to be so conscious of that. But the potential, the sharing potential, is infinite in terms of, especially in terms of our human connection with each other. And Tom, would you like to kind of respond to the question and Benita's comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think about we do have this amazing community capital, that is engaged in certain communities and not as much in others. But just to back up, I mean, during this pandemic, we are really experiencing a collective trauma, as a global society, in a way that we haven't necessarily recognized before. I think that for many, there is this kind of this underlying trauma of the climate emergency and how that is kind of stressing us, at a base level a lot of the time. But we haven't always had like a very tangible thing to connect those feelings to. And, now we do have this moment of being able to come together, and having this shared experience, even though it's a traumatic one, having it with others. And, that is an incredible gateway towards action, but really just for a sense of purpose. So, when I think about the opportunity for increasing our overall well-being, even during a traumatic moment, I think about those sharing initiatives that we've been talking about, of people coming together in oftentimes in really small ways, but reaching out to support others, organizing online, to make sure that people's needs are met, figuring out whatever the way to do that, even in this time of social distancing. And what I'm seeing is that there is a really, a strong need for it, for that type of connection, even though it's digital. And what I'm really hopeful for is that coming out of this is that there's going to be a bunch of new relationships that have been forged, that are oftentimes very local, without having to have having the opportunity to be forging those relationships in person. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be wanting to reach out to their neighborhoods, have more collective gatherings, and kind of strengthen those social ties in person coming out of this. And that's one of the things that we kind of have been seeing again and again. One of the greatest indicators for overall resilience really isn't physical infrastructure, or technology. It's really interpersonal relationships. There's been many studies that have found that the amount and depth of your in-person relationships, this was researched in Japan after the triple disaster of the earthquake, nuclear meltdown, and tsunami. Also the heavily researched for the Chicago fires in the 90s, that showed that all things being equal, those that had the greatest social relationships were more likely to survive those disasters. There was somebody that was going to show up and help you get out of your home, to check up on you. And so coming out of this, I think it's going to be a unique cultural moment that hopefully we're going to be able to kind of move through this disaster and really start to address kind of the larger underlying climate emergency that we're facing.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Really powerful response there. And I think that it's so important to remember that kind of a holistic sense of well-being is about acknowledging those more challenging aspects of the experience that we're going through right now, in terms of this collective trauma and the challenge that's going on. And actually moving towards a society focused on well-being is about really being honest and open about the challenges that are being faced, and therefore, from that point, looking at what helps, and what helps, like you've both said really powerfully, is a strong sense of social connection. That's been proved again and again through research to be something that really supports people's well-being in response to disasters and also throughout people's lives. And actually, you lead us on to the next question that we were going to discuss, which I think has been touched on a little bit in the chat box as well, which is how you mentioned there, Tom, about kind of moving forward, or how, you know, what will this kind of moment teach us, and how will we kind of move forward from this moment? So the next question is how could the sharing economy kind of help us to kind of build back better, to take a phrase of the day that's been used in different contexts, but what could the sharing economy offer to this moment of COVID-19 that we've been in social distancing? How could it play part of the kind of rebuild and recovery narrative? And yeah, either Tom or Benita, welcome to come in on that.
I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting, Tom mentioned before the whole idea of mutual aid, and I think that's one of the really sort of powerful components of this whole experience, is collective experience, is that, you know, people have come together in their communities. I'm just going to, you know, talk for a second about, you know, the street that I live in, Compton Avenue in Brighton, where we have really strong WhatsApp group, and every day during this pandemic, you know, people will say, does anybody need anything? You know, we've shopped for the disabled elderly people on the street. Nobody has you know, been left alone during this. There was somebody on the street that was incredibly depressed, and, you know, people came to and called her and spoke to her and dropped things through her door, and, you know, nobody has felt left alone. And I believe this is going to be a really important component of this rebuilding, that people have actually connected with people that they hadn't connected with before, neighbours. So I think that's something that's going to be a really important part of the rebuilding. But the other thing is this appreciation of nature, because when you can only go out once a day, actually you really start to appreciate that once a day. For those of us who are lucky to have, you know, a small patch of greenery, you know, a place to you know, to go outside, actually, once again, that is giving us an opportunity to spend some time in nature. And so I think all of these things really feed back into how we're going to respond. People thinking more about the planet, you know, considering more before they get on a plane, considering more before they get into a car. So, and it's kind of ironic that a time when the planet has been, the people have been struggling to breathe through this hideous disease, virus, that the planet has been able to breathe. And we've heard about, you know, blue skies over Shanghai and in various other places. So I think there's some really interesting aspects, and all of these things are giving us this greater appreciation, are going to help us rebuild into this more caring, sharing economy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Benita. And yeah, those are two really powerful and really important lessons around kind of connection, how we connect with those around us and also support them. And yeah, indeed, like connection to nature at kind of a very personal level in terms of green space being so good for us and really experiencing that. And also in the kind of wider scale of, yeah, how we're taking care of the ecosystem that we rely on. So yeah, thank you for reflecting those points. Tom, would you like to come in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a unique moment where people are kind of, you know, starting to question our societal structures in general, and that isn't, you know, I would say the sharing economy, or what has become known as the sharing economy, isn't immune to that. I mean, so many aspects of our communities, you know, and business and everything has been affected. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that a lot of people that were, you know, buying up houses to put on Airbnb, essentially as unregulated hotels, are having a really hard time. And there was just a news article that came out, I forget in what paper, where basically a lot of the people that have multiple properties on Airbnb are having to sell them. Because they're not able to make their mortgage and everything else. And so that's going to be putting more housing, you know, back into the general housing stock, which I think is going to be good. You know, there's I think too many Airbnbs at this point in time. And we've seen many of our cities negatively affected by taking so much of the available housing stock off the market. And at the same time, you know, we have to, you know, there was a comment that came here a minute ago, is that, you know, while in some communities there has been a lot more sharing, like we're talking about, and people are coming together. In other communities have less resources, it can lead to more strife. And that's what we have to think about, going beyond our own, local networks. Oftentimes, some of us live in bubbles where we're in very well-resourced communities, and not everybody in our, in our areas, in our neighborhoods or anything are. And so reaching across those divides, or seeming divides, is going to be really, really important. And so that's where some of the kind of more structural changes, where we can kind of flex our civic muscles a little bit beyond our neighborhoods, really becomes necessary. Thinking, this is a unique opportunity where, all over, definitely in the United States and many places around Europe where there was not necessarily guaranteed housing, all of a sudden we're seeing that, there is housing available, open hotel rooms, whatever it is for those that are unhoused. And how do we think about taking some of those temporary Band-Aids to these larger systemic issues, and really using the opportunity, of this critical moment where things are in flux to push for some of those longer term solutions to meet these crises. Just on the housing front, a number of years ago, the entire state of Utah in the United States decided to house all of their unhoused. They did a study. They found out that it cost more money to pay for emergency health coverage and all sorts of things than it was just to provide free housing. And so we know that there's solutions. They're there. One of the things that we have been focusing on at Shareable is that, for a long time is the idea of sharing cities, and, what are those different municipal programs and policies along with community initiatives? How can they work together? And so that's what we did, with our book, Sharing Cities, Activating the Urban Commons, which is kind of our seminal tome we released a couple of years ago, that really looks at a lot of these different, not just around housing, but solutions around energy and food and waste and water. And so I think kind of thinking about how we make sure that everybody in our community is having their basic needs covered at the bare minimum, moving forward, really lifts all of us up together.
Yeah. So true and so powerfully put. Thank you, Tom. And I do think you're right that this is a really a moment and an opportunity where people are questioning those overarching structures as well. So that's what really creates the potential for a deeper level of change. So we're going to move towards splitting into breakout rooms now, so that you guys can have some chats with each other about what's been shared, and around some specific questions we'd like to suggest. But before we do that, I'd just like to say one thing that really inspires us at the Network of Wellbeing is seeing small-scale practical examples of sharing, so that it can kind of inspire people to see the potential of this new way of doing things. And just before we break out, I want to invite my colleague Mirella to just briefly introduce a project that we do at the Network of Wellbeing, which is called the Shareshed, which is an inspiring example of kind of a community project that's kind of showing a new way of doing things. So I'll just hand over to Mirella briefly to introduce that.
Thanks everyone. Yes, the Shareshed is a library of things in Totnes, Devon, in the UK. It's really nice actually to see quite a few of my friends and colleagues in terms of the sharing community, both in the UK and in the world here. So this is, for those who are not familiar with Library of Things, this is a place a bit like the same concepts of a book library. People come and borrow things such as tools, camping equipment, gardening stuff, all sorts of useful things that we might need just every now and then. And that's for a very minimal fee. So we do charge things. In our case, our model, we use it on a weekly kind of base loan. And people come and join as a member. The reason why I'm saying is in our case, because every Library of Things has a different kind of model. And this way it just helps things keep circulating. 95% of our items have been donated by members of the community here in Totnes. And the way it works is that we have a wish list. So whenever someone asks us for something, we add that to the wish list. And the magic is that someone else in the community will have that just lying in the garage and will be able to donate it to us. And as simple as that, really. And we facilitate that. At the moment, we have over 350 items, and we've been running for over 3 years. And we are very exciting kind of point in our journey, because we've been very privileged to get some grant from the National Lottery Fund to create a mobile version of the Shareshed, which means that we're just now kind of converting a van and getting the most popular things, such as carpet cleaners, pressure washers, streamers, and dehydrators, all sorts of things inside, and we'll be trialing this kind of new way of doing things and expanding it beyond Totnes to other 3 communities in Devon, Buckfastleigh, Ashburton, and South Brent. And if you want more information, please do check out our website, shareshed.org.uk, and feel free to drop me a message. I'm very happy if whoever wants to set a library of things up, I'm very happy to, and me and my colleague Mark, we're happy to share our learnings, and just really, it's a very mutual kind of, a very collaborative process, and hence why it's really lovely to see so many of my colleagues here. So thanks guys for joining.
Thanks so much, Mirella, and thank you everyone for your kind comments in the chat box. I see that we've got people that have borrowed from the Shareshed, people that have been inspired by the Shareshed to set up library of things where they are based. So yeah, really exciting to see, like you say, Mirella, all the connections. So yeah, now we've heard 3 really inspiring presentations, introductions into different framings of sharing, and we've had a bit of a discussion. What we're going to do now is just have up to 10 minutes in smaller groups of about 3 or 4 people that you'll be split into on Zoom, and I'm going to invite you to share on 2 particular questions in your discussion group. I put them in the chat box, but I'll put them in again just now whilst we're talking about it. So the questions that you'll be talking on are: briefly introduce yourself, so just your name and where you're based, and then in follow-up from the poll that we shared at the start of this webinar, what activities of sharing have you been involved in during this period of COVID-19, or would you be interested in getting more involved in? And feel free to kind of reflect on the responses that have been shared by the speakers and the examples that have been shared, like the Library of Things by Mirella, and then we'll come back together after 10 minutes max for a kind of more group Q&A discussion to close this evening's webinar. Just to say, you will be in groups of 3 or 4, so make sure to kind of give everyone in that group space to speak. So it'll be kind of two minutes or so each approximately, and I'll trust you guys to manage that in your groups. You'll see a little box inviting you to go into the room in a second, so I'll just invite you to click on that now. And enjoy your discussions. So just to briefly check, if anyone's still in the main room that would like to go to a breakout room, I can move you there now, so just let me know. Just to say, if anyone's having problems joining the breakout rooms that's in the main room that can still hear me just now, maybe just unmute yourselves and let me know. I think, Sol, I'm trying to, oh, you seem to have dropped off. I'm trying to add you to a room now, but I can't see you on the list. So yeah, if anyone's trying to get into a room but having issues, please just let me know now and I will try to help you. Or equally, we could have a breakout room discussion. Hi. Everyone else is in a breakout room, so it's just me and you. Except I can't hear you. Hi.
Hello, how you doing?
Okay. I don't know whether anyone else can, everyone's in their breakout room discussion, so I don't think
Okay, that's all right. Well, and what happens after that then?
And then we just have a Q&A to finish.
Okay, how long will that be?
We're finishing at 1:45.
Oh, okay, well, I'll just wait, Flo, because you know, I'm on a walk with Tilly anyway, so
Nice.
I've just literally just sort of like, you know, left the house and finished work, really, you know, like, so you've had your speakers then?
Yeah, we have. Did you hear? You didn't get to hear them?
No, we had another late one, so I'm afraid I didn't. But I know Em's on it.
Ah, okay. She's probably in one of the breakout discussions.
Yeah. Well, I can always watch it back later, can't I?
Yeah, you can indeed. Are you
Yeah,
having
right.
a nice?
You left all on your lonesome.
I know.
No mate. No mate moderator.
No, but we're still, the funny thing is it's still recording, but only the main room. So later on, when I watch it back, it'll be you saying no mate moderator.
Right, nice one. So where are you at home?
Where am I? Yeah, I'm at home, yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry to have missed it.
Oh, no worries. It was really good,
Hey!
actually. Really good.
It was. Yeah. Good. Yeah. And what are they talking about in their breakout rooms?
Yeah. So they're all just having their various chats about the topic at hand. And then in about a few minutes, I'll kind of invite everyone back and we'll have a group Q&A. But well, you can listen to the Q&A when everyone comes back.
I will do.
Yeah, nice. Oh, it's nice for you to come.
Yeah, I'll turn the volume down so you can't hear me shouting at Tilly.
I can put you on mute, don't worry.
Yeah. But yeah, so what sort of issues have come up, do you think?
Well, it's all about sharing economy and well-being. So a whole range of issues, a lot about connection and having a sense of purpose being kind of strong factors of well-being, but also kind of a sense of kind of collective trauma happening at the moment and the importance of acknowledging that. As well as this being a kind of moment where we can really question like underlying societal rules and structures and kind of really look at, okay, how could we do things in a new way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I'm signed up for that. Well, you carry on, Florence. I mean,
Okay.
if you've got other things to do.
Yeah, I'm just going to send a message to everyone letting them know there's only a few minutes to go.
Oh, sorry, Tilly. Okay, Lovey. Put me on mute.
I will do. Thanks. So sorry if I had to cut your discussions short, guys. I know it's always a little bit tricky in breakout room discussions when you just get into the flow of things and connecting with people, and then you're cut short. But hopefully, just to let you guys know that are joining back now, welcome back. If you were just in the middle of an important point, or you're really keen to connect with the person that you or people in your room, in the chat box you can select to write a private message to someone. So if you go to the chat box and then where it says type message here, above it says to everyone in the waiting room, or you can also choose to send messages to individuals in the chat box. So if you're really keen to continue your discussion on or stay in touch or make a final point. And also just to say, we will be of course sending the recording out of this talk and also of this webinar, and also follow-up links so that you can find out more about all of the things that have been shared. Again, sorry if I cut your discussion short, but I just really wanted to give time for us to have a shared audience Q&A as well. So first of all, maybe I could just, there's a reactions button just at the kind of bottom of Zoom, so maybe I can just invite you, if you enjoyed your breakout room discussion, you could just give a brief either thumbs up or clapping emoji, just so I can check in. Great, I see Danny, Alice, Steve, Anthony, Helen, Samantha all having great, and Abby and Murdo. Oh, welcome back, Murdo. Lovely to hear that you guys all had lovely, useful chats. So we're going to move on to the question and answer section. So if you've got questions to direct to our speakers, Tom and Benita, and or to my colleague Mirella, who introduced the Library of Things, please put them in the chat box, and I'm going to invite my colleague Roger to give a bit of summary of the key questions that have been asked so far, and then we'll hand over to Benita and Tom for responses. So Roger, are you there and able to unmute yourself?
I certainly am, Flo, and thanks for everything for you doing, which is brilliantly hosted as always. Only 3 or 4 questions so far, so feel free to throw them in. I guess one of the things I was going to start with was something that came up in my breakout group, which is Caro asked from East London, which is, to what extent does sharing work for individuals as opposed to institutions? And is it the case that in some cases institutions are so big that they can't really get their act together to share quickly? And is there therefore a role more for community groups?
Thanks, Roger. Tom and or Benita, would you like to come in on that question and response?
Yeah, I'm happy to just jump in first real quick. You know, really, I mean, I think it takes all kinds. We need to share at every level. And, you know, while Communities, I think, can react much quicker. You know, it takes a little while to turn the ship of the larger the institution. There are a lot of institutions that are that already are starting to realize that they need to share more resources and are institutionalizing it into their culture. Just a couple of examples, and I brought this one up actually on our breakout system, is the Warpit reuse network, which is really popular in the UK and many of other countries as well, you know, where they are a system for sharing massive amounts of resources and equipments, either within institutions, so like within a health system or a government body, or from the institutions outwardly. And they've, you know, in the last number of years, the last numbers I have for it, you know, is that they have been able to divert, I'm trying to find, you know, billions of tons of materials that would have otherwise gone to waste have been redistributed. And, you know, it's 50% of universities in the UK are using Warpit, 20% of healthcare institutions, 30% of city councils, 50% of central government departments. So it's very, very well used. And, you know, another great example, you know, when it comes to food is with, you know, Food Cloud, which is partnering between you know, businesses like Tesco and food banks, and then community members which are working in between them to help distribute, you know, food that would otherwise go to waste. So, you know, we can be partnering with larger institutions, we can be encouraging our larger institutions to be sharing more, you know, parallel to engaging deeper at a community level.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree with everything that Tom said. And I think one of the things that's been really interesting during this crisis is just the speed at which some of these things have happened, and institutions and organisations and government departments have been able to move and have had to move incredibly quickly. You know, very, very quickly we saw public and private healthcare come together to work together. You know, we saw, you know, a hospital for, you know, 4,000 beds being put into the, you know, one of the largest conference centres. And, you know, people from very large institutions were having to make changes incredibly quickly. You know, businesses have had to respond to this in a helpful way. So I think, you know, interestingly, in this time of crisis, those organisations that have found it so difficult to change and embrace change before now have had no choice but to do that, and have managed to find ways in which to do that. So I'm really heartened by that. You know, the speed at which homeless people in the UK were housed is absolutely extraordinary. It's an extraordinary story. The challenge, of course, now is, whilst they've been put into temporary accommodation to take people so they haven't been rough sleeping during this pandemic. The challenge, of course, is how do we ensure they have this long-term sustainable housing? That's going to be the big challenge. But my point is the speed at which some of those institutions and those departments were able to suddenly cut through red tape and bureaucracy and make this happen because they had no choice, because lives were at stake. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Tom and Benita, for those responses. I'm going to go rapidly back to Roger so that we can get a few more questions in before we close. Roger, you're just on mute at the moment.
The chat box has gone crazy with questions, so I had difficulty keeping up there. But there was a whole series about, which maybe Mirella might also answer as well, which is about what's the key to making a sustainable sharing project? Can we think of it? Can we mention some really good examples of sharing projects? It was Danny and Anthony, and then we had Steve saying how receptive are organisations like primary care trusts, local authorities to this agenda? Is there support from the public authorities? I got to give a shout out to Val, who wants to promote her sharing coffee mornings. And then finally, right at the very beginning, we had Rosen, who wants to know what's the future going to be like post-COVID in the sharing world? What can we do and what's happening there that we can point a finger to? Is it going to be better, more sharing, or do you think less sharing? So a whole series of questions.
So yeah, a whole range of topics there. Perhaps on the first question about practical examples, I'll just briefly check in with Mirella whether you'd like to share anything from your experience at the Library of Things, and then we'll hand over to Benita and Tom on the other questions and that one as well, if they'd like.
Yes, with the Shareshed, one of the major learnings for us has been to ask for help and to ask what we need. And people are much more supportive, open, and resourceful sometimes that I certainly have been giving credit them for. And the generosity, just look for the abundance is all around. And I think that's the greatest learning. If we come from a place of lack, we see a lot of poverty, and I'm not dismissing at all that the challenges, the great challenges a lot of people are facing, not at all wanting to play that down. At the same time, I think this is very key, especially going forwards in this current context, to look for the abundance and to trust on that and to really kind of nourish that all around. And the way I've found that helpful is to really get the conversation going. Somewhere or another, whatever context it is. In our case, we're sharing stuff like physical things, but may well be sharing care, sharing money, sharing whatever it is that you have to offer or you might need.
Yeah, thank you, Mi. And it kind of links back to a point Benita was sharing earlier in the discussion around kind of we have a planet of finite resources, but there's infinite potential for kind of connections, and that you've found that in your experience of the way that the Shareshed has been set up is inspiring to hear about. So thank you. I know that was quite a range of questions that Roger shared, but I'm just going to invite Tom and or Benita to come in on those, whichever topic grabbed you.
Yeah, I've got a few answers, and if Benita, if you mind if I just jump forward. So, just looking at some of these questions, part of it comes down to, like, what should we be doing now, and who should we be doing it with, and how should it be done? There's a question about, how do I engage, my neighbors that don't want to share, that feel like they can buy their way out of it. There's a question around, what about those ideas that weren't working before, that were on the shelf? Is it worth bringing them back now? Or is it, should we just focus on new things moving forward? My advice is I'd go back to a quote from Howard Thurman, from the book The Living Wisdom of Howard Thurman, a visionary of our time. Says, don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive, and go do that. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive. And I think that's really this moment is, find a purpose, find the people, find the others who are around you who have a shared interest, and start working with them. Build something that's successful, no matter how small, that's successful for you first, so that you're getting value out of it. So you feel, that you want to continue to do that work that propels you forward. And as you start to build, success, and have a number of minor successes and build momentum, other people will jump on. Don't wait until you have, even a critical mass to be able to do that. I mean, that's one of the things that I was a co-founder of a tool library many years ago. And, we started just by collecting tools and sharing with all the volunteers of all the people that were starting to get it going. And we started to, on a very small scale with 15, 20 people, we started with 5, and then built up from there to be able to try it out. And then once we were able to build, enough momentum, we were able to have a whole shop, and, it's still going today. But really start with something that you are passionate about, and that you can find others who are passionate as well.
Yeah, and I suppose too, for me to add to that, I think one of the things that's been really interesting is that during this time we've been, I mentioned this earlier, this idea of value, what are the things that are important and what do we value? And, these terms like key workers, and looking at, what is it that's really making a positive contribution to, to people and planet. And for me, that taps into how do we enable these things to be sustainable? How do we create this sustainable sharing society and sharing economy? And so for me, it comes back to what contribution is, whatever it is that you're doing, whatever project, and that taps into what Tom's saying about purpose, is, is this really adding value to, to the planet and to people and to community? And, I believe there's a kind of falling away of things that are superfluous. And that's one of the things that's happened during the pandemic, isn't it? That we've really had to look at what's actually important. Do I really need that? Is that something that is of true value? Is that something that's going to make me happy? Is that something that I actually is useful and needed? And how can I be part of that? So I think there's something about that value shift and focusing on what really matters and what is making a positive contribution. I also think one of the things that's really interesting is that, we've seen a shift over the last 10 years in terms of businesses, for example, having to appreciate that they can no longer solely focus on profit, but actually they need to be creating economic, not just economic, but environmental and social value. And I believe that, this pandemic has really demonstrated that. And I think we're going to see a lot of kind of superfluous, businesses that are kind of just sort of seem to be, somewhat irrelevant, falling away. So I'm not saying that, I just don't believe we're going to go back to business as usual. I really don't believe that. But I think it is absolutely about staying true to what's valuable and what matters and what makes a positive contribution.
Thank you so much, Benita and Tom and Mirella. I'm really sorry to those that we haven't got to in terms of the questions directly. We are rapidly running out of time. We were planning to end at 1:45, but we're going to run probably about 5 minutes over, so I hope that's okay with you guys. We will share all of the links and actually it's been a really vibrant chat box discussion this evening, and thank you all for kind of interacting and sharing so much valuable information. So we'll download the chat from Zoom and circulate that in the follow-up email as well, so you guys have all of the information that's been shared, so that this can be the start of hopefully an ongoing discussion and investigation into the sharing economy and well-being for all of you. But I would like to now draw us to a close by inviting both Benita and Tom to share some of the kind of initiatives they're working on and some of their calls to action to kind of get you engaged in listening to, supporting some of the amazing work that they're doing. Would either of you, maybe I'll hand to Tom first and then Benita to close. That's okay.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So again, thanks for participating and being here, everyone. It was, great to speak with you all, and also appreciated our time in the breakouts. Just the closing thing, I kind of mentioned that around coming alive, and really I think that if I could leave anything, it's something that I strive to find in my own life, and try to find those moments within the projects that I'm working on, find those different aspects. And at Shareable, like I mentioned, we've got about 4,000 stories, profiling the different ways that people are sharing all over the world, with 300 how-to guides to get going. So if you're looking find some inspiration, checking out shareable.net is a great place to go. And then I also mentioned earlier that we have a film, the response about Puerto Rico and the mutual aid centers that came there. And that's a 30-minute documentary film that is available for anybody that wants to host some sort of a screening with other people in your community, in your neighborhood, to use it as again, in person or virtually, to think about to kind of bring people together as a tool to then have a conversation afterwards about what projects you might want to do locally, and learn from that. So I just put the link to that in the chat. And again, anybody can just go there if you want to. The film is currently not available on YouTube or anything, but I'm happy to send out a link and support you. And if the timing's right, I'll even show up and present the film myself. And then, just the final request. As I mentioned earlier, we have this response podcast, which is, we do various seasons. Right now, we're in the 3rd season of the podcast. I talked a little bit about our most recent audio documentary that came out 2 weeks ago. We just released another episode this morning. And if you listen to podcasts, please check it out. If you like what you hear, if you would leave a rating or a review. I know it sounds so small and people ask about it all the time, but it actually really does make a big difference. Kind of encouraging people to, helping people find it on iTunes and, wherever else they're listening to their podcasts. So please check that out. And again, that's the Response Podcast.
Thank you so much, Tom. And Benita, just to briefly check in with you, would you like Mirella can maybe share your final 2 slides for your...
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll just invite Mirella to share her screen again so you can see the final 2 slides that Benita wanted.
Thank you so much. So a few things I just want to mention. I talked about the book Generation Share. Next week for Global Sharing Week, we are launching an electronic version, a digital version of the book. Remember, every copy helps to feed and educate girls in the slums in Mumbai, particularly pertinent at this time during the COVID-19 crisis. We are on a mission to feed and educate over 1,000 girls in the slums, and the book is available online from Policy Press and ebooks, and I know that you're going to be sending out some links following that. One of the things to say about this book, recently it was voted, cited as the top isolation reads for a positive future. You know, if you're feeling challenged, you're having a rough day, it's called the Big Yellow Book of Hope. It's full of just 200 really positive, inspiring stories, and you know, with every purchase it's really creating some social impact. So I really urge people to take a look at Generation Share, and you know, please do share that far and wide. And the second thing I'd like to mention is that next slide actually. Next week is, as I mentioned, it's Global Sharing Week. I think we've got one more slide. There we go. And we have a competition. So we'd love for people to share their photos and their videos of kindness during Global Sharing Week. Please share them on Instagram. You can tag us at generation_share. And at the very end of the week, each day we're going to, we will feature one of these videos or photographs that have been sent to us. And at the end of the week, the winner is going to receive their very own copy of the Generation Share book. And the final thing that I just really like to leave you with, I mentioned next week is Global Sharing Week. And something that I like to think about every single day when I get up, and it's a question I think we can all ask ourselves, is what can you share today? You know, what can I share today? How can I share with my neighbours, in my community? And I think that's something that, you know, if we all consider that, yes, our planetary resources are finite, but we've got this unlimited potential to share, and to share is to be human. So I'm going to leave you with that thought of every day next week, and perhaps every day, what can you share today? So thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you so much, Benita. That's really beautiful closing remarks, and I see it resonating in the reactions from people. So thank you to Benita and Tom for being such amazing guests this evening. Thank you for Mirella for sharing the Library of Things and for stepping in with the slides at the last minute. And thank you for you all for being such active participants in this webinar this evening. These webinars are happening every 2 weeks on Tuesday evenings. Our next one will be around compassion in action, caring for others and caring for ourselves. And we're going to have guests from Action for Happiness, the Advire Initiative, and the Heart Movement. And we'll send the registration link around with the follow-up email as well. And like Benita mentioned, and Tom mentioned as well, we'll include all of the links that have been shared by them both in the follow-up email, so that you can connect more with these wonderful projects and continue to share in whatever way makes you most alive, to take Tom's phrase. So maybe for just to close this evening, I'm going to unmute you all, and maybe we can all just like wave goodbye and say goodbye and thank you to each other.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Oh, love that.
Cheery, cheery.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.